Welcome to the Value Pro Show, where Value Pros get value ready. Hi, thanks for tuning in. I'm your host, Bruce Scheer, and today we're joined by a special guest, Mike Wilkinson. Mike is a very well-known value sales expert and has co-authored several books on value-based pricing and selling. He's worked with clients worldwide, helping sales teams transform their approach to understand, communicate, and deliver outstanding customer value. Today, we'll be discussing a crucial topic for any sales professional, how to be buyer ready. Get ready for some invaluable insights that could help you exceed your quotas and build stronger relationships with your clients. Let's dive in. Okay, Mike. Hey, I'm so excited for this episode. We're going to have a great time. We're going to be talking today about how to be buyer ready. So I'll just kind of cue up a little bit for context. We created this value ready assessment. And Mike, you and I were talking about just before this episode about how important it is to be value ready in 2025. So we've got this framework, we've got an assessment coming out, and the assessment looks at how value ready the revenue team is across each of the four phases along the buyer journey. Phase one, job one, build trust. And that's, credibility ready, client ready, narrative ready. You need to kind of have all those things in place and be spinning right in those domains in order to build trust. Then you need to move into the second phase, understand needs. And that's where buyer ready and discovery ready come into play. Then if you get those two things right, and you've already got the trust, now you move into phase three of delivering insights. That's where you need to be demonstration ready, connect the dots of value to what their challenges are, and then help them justify it with a business case at the end of the day. And then finally, that's not the end. That's now the client saying yes, but you need to move to phase four, drive execution. Who else needs to line up and sign on the dotted line, or at least give their nod of approval? Typically, procurement gets involved, information security, and other stakeholders that might not say enthusiastically yes, but they could say no. And so you need to get everybody on the bus by being approval ready, then negotiate. And if you did your job right on everything else, you have less discounting pressure and less price pressure, and then more on, hey, let's share that value together. That's the negotiation when things go right. And then impact ready. How do you set your client up for success, both your buyer who you want to get promoted and then their organization to get all that value? How can you measure for that and make sure your client is successful? So we've got episodes across all these dimensions. This one's on how to be buyer ready under understanding needs. So we'll go ahead and move into that. And Mike, we normally like to talk about why be buyer ready. I'll let you lead off. Go ahead and give us some thinking on what your thoughts would be. Why be buyer ready?
I think my first thought on being buyer ready is if I was the buyer, I would expect those people who came to see me to be ready to see me. For me, it's all about that development of trust and respect and credibility. If you turn up, and let's face it, there is lots of both anecdotal and real evidence to suggest that an awful lot of sellers are turning up with to have conversations with buyers when they are monumentally unready to do so, ill-prepared. They're not properly sort of put together. Their arguments aren't put together. Their value propositions are woolly. So there's a lot of work to be done. And I think when we look at being buyer ready, this is such an important episode because this is the thing that really sets the foundations for everything else that is going to happen.
Yep. Now, I couldn't agree more. And it's only the few that show up buyer ready, literally. Yesterday, a guy gets on my calendar. I know one of his clients. He saw me as a potential client and scheduled time on my diary and showed up and started. Have you ever heard the phrase death by 1,000 questions, Mike?
Well, I think actually, you're lucky. I think there are two things happen, aren't there? Either you get death by 1,000 questions, or you get somebody who turns up who's never met you before, who just goes straight into features and benefits mode and just starts spewing out, both of which
this is a step above. But honestly, Mike, it was incredibly irritating. He was just asking questions that he could have easily looked at our website to see what we do. He could have looked at my LinkedIn profile to see what's my role in this whole puzzle. And he was asking basic questions like that, just illustrating to me he did not do his homework. He wasn't buyer ready at all. He was winging it on my time and on my dime. My time's money, and I got to spend it wisely, and he stole my time.
Right.
And then after a while, I just cut him off, Mike. I just said, hey, this is a lot of questions. I'm kind of done now. And then we switched topic just a little bit. Boom, off the call. All credibility lost. He didn't prepare at all.
I think that's the most important word here, isn't it? In terms of being buyer ready, is establishing credibility.
It really is. It's credibility, but moving a step forward, it's truly doing that homework. I want to highlight 3 nasty stats. I know you and I have some fun talking about things like this, nasty stats.
And these are horrors.
They'll queue up each one. So 76% of B2B buyers now expect more personalized attention from solution providers based on their specific needs. And this comes from a reputable source, Drip. So 76% of buyers expect it. And Mike, I was talking about some of the trend lines for 2025. Buyers are going to expect even more of this just because of AI. That guy that couldn't bother himself to look at my website nor go to my LinkedIn profile, hopefully he's got a subscription to ChatGPT. He could have just typed in Bruce Scheer and Value Pros there and got at least a summary profile on me. And buyers are going to expect that. Why didn't you do anything before reaching out to me? So anyways, just personalization. And Mike, I don't know if this happens to you. I get people reaching out to me on LinkedIn all the time. And I'm hearing this lie more and more. Hey, I looked at your profile and you're amazing. And I've got a premium subscription and Sales Navigator. I can see who's doing what, and they're lying. They got their AI tool automated and just endorsing me, sending me a note like that, a blatant lie like that, and then trying to show up and wing it. And just, it's really frustrating, but it's not authentic. It's not true. And it's not personalized to the 76% stat. And buyers expect it. So that's so critical that we need to meet and exceed that expectation. Let's talk about the second one, Mike. Another nasty stat. 75% of B2B buyers prefer a rep-free sales experience. And I think we just hit on one of the reasons that, because sellers showing up and winging it and completely dispacing, haven't done their homework, not hitting the ground running with that buyer.
Well, I think any seller seeing that particular stat in particular who isn't asking themselves the question why is really in a bad place. You've got to understand, why is it that buyers prefer to have a rep-free sales experience? What on earth are salespeople doing?
Well, I argue why I dropped this stat here, Mike, because they're not buyer ready. They're showing up, like you said, features, functions, talking about price too fast and just kind of getting into the product domain. They're not doing their homework. They're not connecting at a deeper level. And so, therefore, it's kind of a bit of a waste of time.
You'll also know that I love my Forrester stat about the only 12% of the meetings I have with sellers has any value. And that absolutely, so why am I going to spend time with salespeople when 88% of the time I spend is wasted?
Yep. So yeah, the brutal truth, the ugliness in the world, ugly stat number 2, 75%. Let's go to the ugly stat number 3, 69%. Actually, this is a bit uplifting as well.
I got to say,
it's not all ugly.
This is better.
There's a huge upside. So the stat for 69% is salespeople who exceed quota are significantly more likely to say that they always research prospects before reaching out. Among those who exceed 50% of their quota, 69% always research. So that's where I anchored on that 69% number, that if you want to exceed your quota, 69% say they're always researching and doing a good job of doing their homework on the buyer, on the company, et cetera. And a friend of mine was featured in Harvard Business Review, Ray McKellar, in December. And they also have some statistics that just correlate. If you do your homework, you're going to have a better close rate. You're going to be a higher performer, way higher performer. And I would also argue, there's another guy I know in industry, Andy Paul. If you're closing more, disproportionate to your other colleagues, chances are you're going to retain more as well. In this day and age of software as a service and, everything as a service and monthly payments, and it's easier to switch out these high performers that really kind of land the plane and do well by their buyers, understanding their buyers and being relevant to them. They will keep those buyers longer, which is very powerful. Yeah. Well, there we go. So anyways, Mike, I think there's an upside. 69% outperform
it's good
through
to
doing
see
their homework.
That there is at least it's good to see there is at least an upside somewhere.
Yeah, seriously. There is, and we're going to talk about the upside. But just to summarize, some of the benefits of being buyer ready: A, you get to stand apart from the pack. You will be unusual. You'll be in the 12% club, as Mike likes to reference it. Stealing your concept, Mike, which I absolutely love.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, all attribution to you. Secondly, you get to have a special place in your buyer's mind because you did land well, you resonated, you were relevant, credible, and helpful. You did serve. You helped them see things in a new light. You get a special place in their mind. You're unusual. You're not the typical sales rep. And then thirdly, you get to win more deals more often. Your win rate's going to go way up, and your retention rate with those customers, I contend, is going to go way up as well because you're going to occupy that special place in their mind. And I was re-looking at some of the Challenger research from days gone by where 58% of that influence on the buying experience is the seller that influences the sale. That number's gone down just a hair, but it still holds true. So you get this right, you're closing more deals and you're going to exceed your quota. All right, Mike. Well, let's move into kind of the how land next. How do we be buyer ready? And let's kind of dialogue around this. And the framing here is, how do you be a novice or how do you be a master versus a novice? How do we climb up these stairs and get really good at being buyer ready? So let's probably start with the low bar. And that comes off our value ready assessment, which you're going to see is very powerful. It's rich in data, et cetera. You'll find it off of valuepros.io under our resources tab, where you can get into the assessment on being buyer ready. But the key point, Mike, is a novice in being buyer ready. They lack understanding of the buyer's role, their objectives, their challenges. They're often treating all buyers the same, which we've already talked about. They fail to research or identify key decision makers, leading to ineffective engagement and lack of personal connection with the buyer. So that's the low bar. Anything you would add to that, Mike, before we move into mastery here?
I completely agree. I think part of the issue with this is people do need, when they do the assessment, and I absolutely recommend people do the assessment, is to be honest. And if this does describe you, at least honestly say, yeah, this is me. Right now, this is me. But now I know, or you'll very shortly know from Bruce, what you can aspire to.
Yeah, and we'll hit some of the elements of the assessment in this episode.
I look at all of these. That journey from novice to master is exactly that. It is a journey. There are stages that you can go through, but anything that takes you away from being a novice at this game has got to be a positive.
Totally. Let's see, how do we move away? What does mastery look like? What's best in class? As value pros, what are their behaviors? They exhibit an exceptional understanding of the buyer's ecosystem. So they kind of understand the world of the buyer and their company, anticipating needs and proactively addressing challenges. So they're kind of thinking ahead. They understand. They can mention things that the buyer doesn't even have to mention. They kind of understand. There's that level of attunement. They conduct comprehensive research to cultivate personal connections, making buyers feel special and appreciated, and positioning themselves as a trusted partner. Isn't that awesome?
I think that is awesome. And quite rightly, it's something that you would really have to strive hard to achieve. That it is the ultimate in the game. Because I think what you need to be is in a situation where your customer would never think of anybody else other than you when they find the need to pick the phone up and talk to somebody.
Yeah, totally true. Well, the neat thing is this is a set of skills and behaviors to be a master at this. And of course, we've got training around this. And also we've got a new AI tool that's just getting ready for market here within weeks, but it'll do a lot of the research. So you can understand the buyer's ecosystem. You can understand that buyer.
Yeah.
Our tool will even, Micah, will even scrape their LinkedIn profile legally, I might add, and help correlate where are the connections between you and that buyer? What do you share in common? What passion and interest do you have? And really help set the table for the value pro so they can show up buyer ready, which is just so profound. But there's some AI to support the right behaviors. You still have to do your homework. You're just using a more efficient tool these days. And hopefully our tool will really benefit a lot of people. And if not our tool, Salesforce has some AI capability within it, LinkedIn Sales Navigator. I myself use that and some of the AI functionality in that to understand the buyer's ecosystem. So yeah, there are handy tools out there. Ours is going to be awesome too.
Yours is definitely going to be awesome. There's a lot of help.
Built for value pros. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. Well, that sets the high bar for mastery. Now, how do we get there? So there's 5 key things that you should be thinking about. So first, understanding buyer roles, just who's who on the client side, typically that would be involved naturally, that are going to gravitate to being on the buying committee for what you have to offer. So that's critical, Mike. And we build value playbooks for organizations and their revenue teams just for basic context. Who are the key decision makers? Who are the approvers and distractors? Just understanding that in terms of general context. You and I have both talked about that. You got to go deeper than that. But just for framing, understanding who's the typical parties that are going to be in that buying committee and who has voting rights, who doesn't. How does that all work? Understanding the buyer roles. Anything you'd add to that, Mike?
Yeah. I mean, I always say to people, there are 2 things you need to know. You need to know how is the decision going to be made. So what will be the process and who will be involved. And I think the other thing that I would say, because I do occasionally come across people say, well, it's all sorted out. We know who the decision maker is. We're absolutely on the home run. Then they lose the business. And one of the key reasons, because I do occasionally go out and do post-pitch research for people, for clients. And one of the ones is always, why did we lose? We thought we had it nailed on. And I did one for one particular client. They were convinced they were going to win because they knew that the key buyer, they had him absolutely on side. And I went and saw this chap and he said to me, you want to know why they didn't win the business, don't you? And I said, yeah, of course I do. I said, because they thought they had you, they were having great conversations with you were saying all the right things. And he said, yeah, I thought they were really great guys. I thought we could really do business together. But the thing they completely misunderstood was, despite the fact that I was the ultimate decision maker, the decision I made was going to be based upon the advice and support I got from a couple of my colleagues, and they never even went to see them.
Oh, I love it. I love it.
I think you underestimate the power of decision influencers. I think decision influencers are sometimes sort of ignored. We know the decision maker. We don't need to talk to the decision influencer. Oh, yes,
that's the key thing, to understand all these roles. But then, as you say, identifying the key decision makers on that particular deal, on that pursuit. And then also, who are the approvers? Mike, one of our colleagues, Dean, former head of procurement for Levi Strauss, and then also Ingram Micro, was saying that if he said no on a deal, 90% chance that deal was dead at that point.
Yeah.
So,
and the other problem,
who else is going to be an approver?
The other problem, I think, increasingly is that so many people are now getting involved in the decision-making process. So making sure that, use your baseball terminology, make sure you've covered the bases and you are talking to everyone.
Yeah, I always like to use that sports analogy or maybe school analogy. Who's going to be on that buying bus? And as you say, last stat I saw was 38% of buying committees are made up of 10 plus buyers. So buying is just way more difficult. There's more decision makers. In the book I wrote, Mike, I take a chapter from another consultant named Steve Martin down in California, but you do need to identify the bully with the juice, who typically has the most power and the biggest voice. But there's other key players here, and you need to play to them. moving forward on that, the next thing you need to do in being buyer ready is build personal connections. That's really, really critical to connect with someone. And I have a story about my brother, Mark. He had a fairly large law firm, 16 attorneys, and then he ended up selling it, and he's just doing really well. But I asked him, he was the ultimate rainmaker for each firm he's been part of. He's been a rainmaker for a huge law firm and then his own law firm. He made it rain big time. I said, hey, Mark, what's your number one piece of sales advice? And he said, Mike, when I'm working with a prospect or a new client, I try to find something that we both share in common. It's a mutual passion that we might have. And Mike, I know you like football, not the real football, not American football, but you like the other type of football.
Sorry, run that one past me again.
Yeah, I know. You're not of this country. Let's just put it that way. But no, I'm joking, Mike. But so perhaps the real football. But my brother's a big soccer fan, and he was talking to a client down in L.A. and found out that they loved the LA Galaxy, especially when Beckham went to play there. Bend it like Beckham. Boy, oh boy, everybody got interested in football and soccer at that point in time here in America because he had the cool factor. So my brother goes out and finds an auction and buys a jersey, a signed jersey, and sends it to that potential client. Of course, that potential client became a client, just thinking, oh my God, that is the nicest thing. And then they got in, just shared that passion again and again. Every time they meet, they get to talk about soccer a little bit, and it's beautiful. It's really fun. I loved his wisdom. Find something in common. And there's another consultant I really appreciate. He wrote a book, How to Take the Cold Out of a Cold Call. And he has a maxim that you should find 5 points of connection. Take 3 minutes, find 5 points of connection. And now with LinkedIn, it just gets really easy. You just looked at the LinkedIn profile, and our tool will even scrape it for you and scrape yours and correlate and find the points of connection. But if you don't have a tool, just look at LinkedIn and find where they're volunteering, what's their work history, where'd they go to school. You know, who do they know? A number of different ways to find connection points. And when you do, gosh, you can just break that ice and things move forward. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mike,
I love this quote. Yeah, I love this quote.
Yeah. Well, the quote, and I heard this in the back of a taxi, I think the first time I heard it, long time ago, pre-Uber days. And my taxi driver said, hey, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And famously attributed to Theodore Roosevelt. I don't know if anybody can find where he truly said that, but anyways, he gets all the credit for it. But by connecting personally, then they know you care. And now, hey, let's talk about the business situation at hand. But you are kind of breaking that ice and getting to know someone pretty well. The next key point is align with buyer objectives. So you've broken the ice, you've made that personal connection. Now let's talk about you and your objectives. What are you trying to achieve? And the key point there, Mike, is one size doesn't fit all. Each buyer has their own objectives. And if you did your homework right, and like we talked about, we build playbooks for organizations, but if you understand the buyer roles, typical buyer objectives, Mike, if I know your CRO, I might say, hey, when I'm talking to other CROs, which I do, they're concerned about Salesforce productivity. And how do they take advantage of AI to perhaps improve that? They're concerned about their win rates, how that's not going all that well right now. It's a tougher market. How do they improve that? So there's some generic things I might lead with and say, hey, I talk to other CROs, here are things I hear, but what about you? What are you trying to achieve over the next 12 months? What's important to you? Or what's 2025 look like? What are your goals?
It's exactly what I do. For me, that's all about moving from the generic, the things that we can anticipate any buyer that we're going to talk to as having an issue with, and moving that from the generic to the specific. So what does it mean specifically to you? Because the generic is not enough. It may resonate, but it won't resonate half as well as it will when we've had a conversation with them to get the specifics from their situation.
You bet. You bet. Totally makes sense. And I'll move on to just this is the fifth point of what you need to do to be buyer ready and to reach that mastery phase, but anticipate their needs. Don't just be an order taker and have them tell you everything and have you irritate them like that one seller did with me yesterday, just by asking a ton of questions and not adding any value, just more extracting value than adding. To be truly buyer ready, you need to anticipate their needs, help them. And I talk about helping them see around corners, maybe things they haven't been thinking about. Perhaps it's a blind spot, or maybe it's just been ignored because, hey, it's been a problem we've always had, and I tried to solve it before and haven't been very successful. But how can you anticipate their needs that's going to drive their performance by teaching them something new and anticipating their needs, letting them know you're thinking ahead for them, especially if you want to retain that buyer.
And partially that starts with understanding what their objectives are in the first place. If you know what they're trying to do, then anticipating their needs, it becomes that little bit more simple.
Yep. Too true. Yeah, it does really center on that. So that's the 5 key points. And Mike, just a nod to the people in the United Kingdom. And I knew you would love this after me bashing you with American football, but the great Churchill here. And I love this, Mike, this quote: "The price of greatness is responsibility," attributed to Winston Churchill. You probably know more about that history than I do. I'm sure you do. But this quote I love: being buyer ready means kind of taking responsibility and to understand that buyer and help them get awesome results. And I know as value pros, that's what we want to do anyways. That's why we exist. We're in it to win it, not only for ourselves, but for our buyers, and just making them the hero of their story and hitting it out of the park. And that's a great responsibility. So I love that quote to make that point, Mike.
I think it makes the point very well as well. And I think if you want to get away from being part of that 75% of buyers who'd rather have a rep-free experience, if you don't do that, if you don't take responsibility for really understanding your customer and your clients, then they're not going to want to spend time with you.
Yeah. It's so true. Well, Mike, any other ideas that you would have to toss into this idea of being buyer ready, this dimension, is the criticality of it?
I'm not sure about any other specific ideas. I think we've really talked about an awful lot of the things that are massively important in this. But partially for me, it's an attitude of mind. It's getting out of that belief that it's okay, we can wing this. This is the easy bit. This is the easy bit of the sale. We don't need to do too much pre-work for this bit because we can just chat about it. Well, no, you can't. And as Bruce said, I think the big plus is there are so many very, very helpful tools out there now that there really isn't much of an excuse not to be well prepared. You really shouldn't be going up and talking to buyers, and when they say to you, well, what do you know about my business? Saying to them, well, not very much. I was hoping you'd tell me. This is not where you need to be. So, yeah, it is about taking responsibility, Bruce. It is about recognizing that that path to mastery is quite a lengthy path. There's a lot to do. But the prize, as you said, 50% of people who achieve quota are the 69% who are actually doing the background research beforehand.
Yeah. Brilliantly stated, Mike. I'd just say, Mike, in conclusion, we have covered a lot of ground and talked about best practices, things to be thinking about, and things to do specifically, some of the research that you need to do. So I just encourage everybody, get into the assessment. There's more recommendations, more content around that. You'll find our Value Ready assessment off of valuepros.io under the Resources tab. Take advantage of it, up your game for 2025, making sure you're a value-ready value professional. That's what it's all about.
Yeah, I completely agree. Absolutely recommend people do it, and let us know how you get on.
Awesome, Mike. Well, thanks for this episode, Mike. I love talking to you on this.
Yeah, and you. Cheers, Bruce.
And that wraps up another great episode of the Value Pro Show. I want to thank Mike Wilkinson for sharing his expertise on being buyer ready. Remember, the path to mastery in value selling is a journey, but the rewards are significant. If you found this episode helpful, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and share with your colleagues. It'll help so many other people find this show. And for more resources, including our Value Ready assessment, visit valuepros.io and check out the Resources tab. Join us next time as we continue to explore strategies to help you become a true value professional. This is Bruce Scheer signing off. Until next time, keep focusing on value.